Okay, here we go. Well, good evening, everyone. I'm John Boquette, Associate Editor for the Newtown Bee, and I'd like to welcome you to our Facebook Live webcast, which is going to be featuring First Selectman Dan Rosenthal, as well as a couple of special guests. We have some developers who are experienced in what I like to refer to as institutional to mixed-use residential conversions. I'd first like to welcome Steve Kaminsky with Dakota Partners. Dakota Partners was founded in 2006, and Steve joined shortly after, bringing experience in financing projects with low-income housing tax credits, historic tax credits, and other federal, state, and local programs. His responsibility is in great part identifying, analyzing, securing, and structuring the financing of sites and building appropriate for multifamily housing and historic conversions. The Dakota Partners team has decades of combined experience designing, developing, and building residential and commercial projects. Got that right, Steve?
That's pretty much it, yeah.
Very good. Also want to welcome Larry Curtis, the President and Managing Partner at WinnDevelopment and a member of Winn Company's Board of Directors. He's led a full range of real estate development and acquisition activities for the company for almost 35 years, helping Winn Companies grow to more than 105,000 apartments under management in 22 states and Washington, D.C. He's also been instrumental in shaping Winn Company's own portfolio of 116 properties. This company has become one of the nation's top developers of historic and iconic buildings for use as residential housing. He is with his wife, Marla Glanzer Curtis, who has run a private architectural and consulting firm in Boxford for more than 2 decades, and she has also worked for the architectural team in Chelsea. She continues to work with that organization as a consultant, and her work there is largely focused on the design of affordable housing and historic buildings. So welcome to you all. We are going to turn this over first to First Selectman Dan Rosenthal. Dan, I guess it's really important to clarify first, because of the many emails and questions I've been getting and comments I've been hearing, that the vote that's coming up that people can actually vote on right now by absentee ballot, the referendum question, this does not automatically activate a residential building project at Fairfield Hills, right?
That's correct, and I'll touch on that in my remarks. But
very good. So
by no means does this make things an absolute certainty. I think it moves the process along, and I think it's important to get public feedback on this question.
Very good. So give us a little bit more background and perspective as to why we have gathered here this evening when the prior 3 public information sessions were conducted sort of pre-COVID in a public environment.
Sure, John. And first I want to thank you and the Bee for hosting this. I know we originally, as you noted, we intended to hold this session back in I guess it was the beginning of March. And unfortunately, as we all know, public meetings became, at least temporarily, a thing of the past. And our goals for having this on a ballot in April ended up shifting until now. But here we are, and I do appreciate your filling the role of MC again to act as sort of an impartial third party to this whole process. So again, my thanks to you and the Bee, to Larry and Marla, and then also to Steve, and of course, all those following from home. So speaking to the process, and again, one could say this process started back in the early 2000s when the town, started to move to purchase the property, and then of course in 2004 when we closed on it. But really, my role in this process dates back really about 2 years ago. So the process we've been going through now, the Master Plan Review Committee about a year ago made its recommendations to the Board of Selectmen. It was actually late summer, which included mixed use housing on the Fairfield Hills campus. That use had been removed from the adaptive reuse zone from the campus about a half a dozen years ago. Before it made its recommendations, the committee spent about a year, the summer of 2018 to the summer of 2019, working on the plan, and they also conducted a survey. The survey was completed by about 1,800 people and admittedly was not favorable to housing, and at the same time was also not favorable to spending additional taxpayer dollars on the campus either. These two outcomes were clearly at odds and by a similar number of respondents. I did a lot of thinking, certainly. We had, I think, an interesting recommendation from the Master Plan Review Committee, but I certainly at the time didn't feel compelled to try to jam that through the Board of Selectmen and then ultimately the Planning and Zoning Commission for a zone change on the campus. So with the support of the Board of Selectmen, I decided to undertake a process, which again, over the last year, I think has provided a lot of transparency around the town's history with the campus, and to try to finish things off with a referendum where the public clearly will get a chance to weigh in on what they'd like to see as it pertains to housing on the campus. The first of those meetings was held in September of last year, then in November, and then in this past February. All three meetings were recorded, and the corresponding presentations are available on the town website under the Fairfield Hills Forums tab on the homepage. The meeting we're having this evening was intended to be held in March, as I mentioned, and followed by the referendum in April. Of course, here we are. I will say that perhaps the silver lining in all this is the number of people that I expect will vote on November 3rd, which should be near 90% of all registered voters, perhaps more, versus the roughly 15% or so we see voting in the annual budget referendum. The ballot language that you'll see when you vote, and again, if you're voting by absentee, those ballots started going out this past Friday. The ballot language was approved by the Legislative Council as part of the charter, and it closely mirrors the recommendation of the Master Plan Review Committee. And I'll read that if you'll indulge me for just a moment. The language reads, shall the town of Newtown consider commercial proposals at the Fairfield Hills campus that include a housing component, provided that a housing component would be limited to no more than 2 of the existing buildings, and that the renovation is consistent with the architectural vision for the property. That ballot language is also followed with some explanatory text. And again, back to the point you made when we started, John, it's sort of indicating that this doesn't automatically make something happen, and I'll read the text. A yes vote on the question is for advisory purposes only and does not automatically approve housing at Fairfield Hills. Updating the Fairfield Hills adaptive reuse zones regulations to include residential use would need to be formally requested by the Board of Selectmen and added to the regulations through a zoning amendment, which would be at the discretion of the Planning and Zoning Commission. Any proposed residential development would have to be limited to renovating up to 2 existing buildings while maintaining the historical exterior facade of the structures. Any specific proposal for housing on the campus would require public meetings and/or hearings and approvals by the Board of Selectmen and Planning and Zoning Commission. To reiterate, there's still a public process that will unfold should our residents agree to allow the town to consider commercial proposals that have a housing component in up to 2 buildings. Should the adaptive reuse zone ultimately be updated to include housing, we would then have to seek formal proposals, from the development community and work with them to establish the best way forward. The firms joining us this evening have expressed interest in the campus, but have not made a formal proposal, as housing is not a permitted use at this time. They are here this evening in the spirit of transparency to discuss and share their respective pedigrees and conceptual vision for how they would undertake a development opportunity on the campus. With that, I'll give it back to you, John. And again, I thank you all for being willing to participate this evening. I'm always happy to speak with any of you following from home to the extent you have additional questions following tonight's discussion. Thank you.
Yeah, we also want to remind anybody who's watching live or who's catching up on the YouTube channel for the Newtown Bee that we'll also have print and web reporting on this session with links back to the video. So there'll be some additional opportunities if we need to ask questions either in this week's edition or next that we haven't got to. We had robust response from community members, a number of whom rightfully put forward questions that are probably more appropriate for the first selectman to answer offline, at least off of this presentation, which we will do if they had not already been addressed in the introductory remarks. We want to leave as much time for questions to the actual teams as possible, and we've got about 15 of them, so I'm not sure we're going to be able to get through them all, but if we don't, we will get answers and have them in the B, either this or next edition. So
I would
without,
also, just to jump
Yep.
in real quick, I'd also note that it's quite possible, without knowing what the questions are, but many of them are probably embedded in the three discussions that we had before. So I do encourage folks to look at those presentations on the town website.
Likewise, yes, good. Steve, we're going to give you and the other team from WinnDevelopment approximately 10 minutes each to talk about your background and let us in on some of the projects that you've done. So what would you like folks to know about yourself and Dakota Partners that's pertinent to what you envision your company might be able to do here in Newtown at Fairfield Hills?
Okay, Steve Kaminsky, Dakota Partners. We're real estate developers and general contractors. Been around for 13, 14 years. We develop only apartments and condominiums. Firm's about 40 people. Development footprints: Mass, Connecticut, Rhode Island, New Hampshire, New York State, Virginia, and North Carolina. Last 10 years, where most productions occurred, we've completed about 15 projects. We've got about 7 under construction right now. Finished about 7 projects in Connecticut, and we have 3 under construction right now in Connecticut. Closest to your location, we have a new construction project in Brookfield in Four Corners. And we also have another project we've completed in New Milford. I believe that's Litchfield County. We do new construction mainly, but also do quite a bit of historic rehab. In Connecticut, we've got 3 historic projects. 2 are complete. Capitol Lofts, a 112-unit project right next to the State House, in an office building conversion on 179 Allen Street, which is about 63 units next to the Union train station. Project under construction right now called Oxoboxel Lofts, which is an affordable project in Uncasville, about a mile south of the casino. About the winter of 2019, we went down, toured the building, met with the reuse committee, listened to the comments, basically went back to the office, engaged the architect, Krosky Associates out of Hartford, conceptualized a plan that we thought would work well for that building. I think the highest and best use would be apartments. Typical for that location and that kind of structure. It lays out pretty well. Don't really see a commercial use for it. We basically would develop the site within NPS, which is National Park Service standards, which basically restore it to its original condition. It would be done total gut rehab, take everything out of the interior, all new windows, all new roofs, elevators, and reconfigure the entire inside. Total project cost for the whole thing is probably about between $50 and $55 million. Now, based on the comments we heard from the reuse committee, we try to give come back with something that might be of benefit to a lot of different aspects of the town. We're proposing a mixed income tenancy, which would probably be about 75% affordable, 25% market rate. I would also mix the tenancy between family and elderly restricted units, probably at the same level, 75-25. It's four floor building, so it'd be about 4 floors of family and 1 floor of elderly. Initially, there again, most of this work was done a year and a half ago. We envisioned a 2-phase type of thing if we were to get involved, 1 for the elderly, 1 for the family. A lot of conditions have changed now. Interest rates are much lower, so quite likely it could be done all at one time. We would, if we were to do it, we'd probably have to acquire 6 acres of land. If you look in the proposal, you'll see how we outlined it, which would give us enough parking. I believe it's about 216 spaces, and would also have to take control of the parking that's being used for the ball field. In consideration of that, we would build a new parking lot next to the ball field. And basically, that's the general vision. I think if, looking at, we've done this a number of times, I don't think we need a lot of assistance from the town to do something like this. Connecticut, the hazmat situation, especially in that building, would be very, very expensive. We would like the town to assist us in that, and there are state resources to do that. And there's more detail in the proposal, in the outline as well. If we do get involved, we would not really need tax abatement. We think we could pay market taxes. In all our other projects in Fairfield County, we share that same burden, and we've been able to make the numbers work. The existing conditions, you're all probably aware, it's 4 stories, 190,000 square feet of building space. I'd call it a fear to poor building. The last time we looked at it, there was a lot of water entering the building. So as the timeline goes along, the building's going to break down. Like I said, the site plan, we would configure probably about a little more than 200 spaces. Unit mix would be a mix of 2s and 1s for the family, mostly 1s for the elderly. The timetable on these projects, we basically propose to use a lot of state and federal resources, and some of that's competitive. So the timeline that we'd be able to achieve in something like this would tie into the funding rounds, which the CHAFA, the Connecticut Housing Finance Authority, runs every year in November. So if you basically selected a developer and somebody like ourselves, the first time you could actually get involved would be November. So you could acquire funding, start in November. It's awarded in, I think, March, I'm sorry. So the quickest you'd ever be able to begin construction would probably be the fall of 2022, be done by the end of 2023 at best. And if you look through the proposal, you can see cut sheets with the different historic projects I've talked about. And when these projects are done, they basically are outstanding. Communities love them. The tenants love them. Interiors are first class. And overall, anytime we've done a historic rehab, it's been a great, great benefit to the community.
Very good. So folks who are watching or who are coming to us on YouTube after the fact should know that we will also be posting links to the presentation documents so that you can follow along after the fact if necessary. Let's go to, and thanks for your expediency, Steve. Let's go to Larry Curtis now and hear your presentation and introductions of WinnDevelopment, sorry.
Thank you, John, and thank you, Head Selectman Rosenthal. Would you wish us to go through our prepared presentation or describe it in the manner that Steve did, just verbally without?
We've got a 10-minute window for you, so.
Okay, great. So 10-minute window in addition to the presentation, or 10-minute window total?
Well, we wanted to do 10-minute window total plus the presentation. But I see.
I'm going to pull up a few slides then from the presentation, and I think that would be helpful if we can. Let's see.
Sure. And Steve, I will. You only took a little over 5 minutes, so if you do want to roll back after this and run through your deck, that's fine.
Sure.
Otherwise, we can just post it and folks can open it separately. So just let me know your pleasure when Larry is finished.
Okay, great. So Win Companies. Win Companies is a family-owned business that's been around for 49 years. We are based in Boston. We operate significant housing in Connecticut. 3,600 employees. We operate all kinds of housing, affordable housing, middle-income housing, workforce housing, military housing, family housing. And I think one thing that we wish the town to hear from this proposal is we're here, if to the extent you were to select us at some point in time in the future, to build whatever housing you wished us to build. If that were elderly housing, we would be pleased to do so. If that were family housing, we'd be pleased to do so. And we, like Mr. Kaminsky, believe that with the ample buildings on campus, there's an opportunity to serve much of the housing needs of many income groups and many types within this campus. This campus could be seen as a liability for the town, or it could be seen as an asset for the town. We see it as an asset for the town, having been active developers of similar property all throughout the region. The before and after is unimaginable, and we're going to show you some slides of what these may be. A lot in Connecticut, I want to emphasize that. Most recently, for those that know East Haven, the redevelopment of the East Haven High School into elderly housing, and as well as properties in Waterbury. A little bit about the architectural team. Marla will join in briefly on that, and architectural team and wind companies often work together on such undertakings.
Yeah, so the architectural team is a design firm engaged in master planning, architecture, and interior design. We have experience with many building types and programs, which Larry just enumerated. It's a 100-person firm that has won more than 100 awards for its design excellence. And we're very proud of the way that we respect the site, the context, and the sustainability, which is evident in all of our work. We have worked with WinnDevelopment for many, many years and on many, many, many successful projects. And near and dear to my own personal architectural bent is historic preservation and historic projects. And the firm has done similar projects to what is existing at Fairfield Hills. And I invite you to look at some of our projects online as well.
Great. We've come up with some preliminary design ideas on why we picked these buildings, but I think that will be best addressed in the questions that come up. Again, very preliminary, basic unit count. We make sure that we have something as we're coming forth with initial ideas that is buildable and financeable, and we're thinking approximately between Shelton and Kent, approximately 170 homes for residents of the town. Similarly, about real estate taxes, where we expect and anticipate to pay the full value if we were to be selected. I think it would be useful to show some images, because many in the town, I think, look and walk by this beautiful campus and see abandoned buildings. And why is that the case? A long history of why it's the case, but how do we turn that negative into a positive? And there's so many ways to do it. They all involve governmental financing, by the way, as Steve also mentioned in his proposal. And I think you're fortunate to have such a high quality firm also undertaking an effort on a different building than what we propose at Kent and Shelton. Some images about, let's jump to, given the time frame. I mentioned East Haven High School. East Haven High School was an abandoned high school, underutilized for several years, now utilizing federal and state historic credits, as well as affordable housing tax credits, a beautiful mixed income community. Just completed, hot off the press, just won a much desired national award for housing rehabilitation. Also, energy sustainability. This has been done as a passive house, which is amongst the highest standards of energy sustainability. Both can happen simultaneously, historic rehabilitation and energy work. This one is, I think, is important. The architectural team was the architect. We were the developer. By the way, I'm also an architect. We're an architect-led development firm that takes into account the design is important and central to the work of what we are doing. This happened to be also an old school in Albany, New York. This converted to also elderly housing. But it reminds me a lot of some of the buildings on the Fairfield Hills campus, a layout of what that is. The boot mills in Lowell, Massachusetts. These are what these buildings are beforehand: blighted, falling down, water damage, construction damage, the worst of the worst. Also an architectural team, Win Venture, turned into a fabulous housing. This one, a combination of affordable housing, middle income housing, market rate housing, elderly housing. If we were to engage in a process that we know will be lengthy, these buildings can turn into housing and can become community assets. Some may ask, why only housing? Why only housing, or housing with ancillary commercial? That's certainly what we hope to have, a true mixed use, mixed income community. We don't want to create a community of only wealthy people. We don't want to create a community of only housing. We want to take these beautiful, unrehabilitated buildings and have them become, again, an asset for the town of Newtown. A lot of people are familiar with this development, Malden Mills, Lawrence, Massachusetts. Remember the factory that burned down where the guy paid all his workers for years and years and years and kept it alive? Well, ultimately, he lost it and to the banks, and this became a vibrant mixed income community as well. Again, this is what Fairfield Hills can become. So a takeaway, Ludlow Mills in Ludlow. A takeaway from this, we would hope, relative to the wind companies, relative to an architectural team, the architectural team, relative to anybody that you ultimately choose, and it's likely to be several entities to be involved in this process, is one, pick a group that has great familiarity, or groups that have great familiarity with historic development. Pick groups that have great familiarities with the public funding process. Not public funding that comes from the town of Newtown, but public funding that comes from entities, from firms that can maximize federal and state resources that come into these developments, because it doesn't happen otherwise. If you were to sell us the property for $1 or master lease the property to us for $1, without public subsidies, these efforts don't work. They're magnets for great work, they're magnets for the community, and they're magnets for towns to work together in public-private partnerships with developers. We're long-term owners, we're long-term operators. Everything we own, we operate, and we're proud of that. We're also proud of the fact that as a company, we've never missed a mortgage payment on a loan, and we would welcome an opportunity. Both Marla and I have taken a personal interest in this. We have, my development team is 30 people. My company is 3,000 plus people. We are engaged at a personal level to the extent the town allows us to be. We would welcome that to turn Fairfield Hills development into all that it can be. And our interaction with the town thus far at a few preliminary meetings has been nothing but positive. You're well served by members of the community, and it's just, we would just love to be involved, and we're happy to answer any questions you may have. Thank you.
Just hitting about 10-minute mark there. Steve, do you want to go through the deck, or do you want to?
Yeah, sure, really quick. Should I pull it up, or will you?
It's up to you, whatever you prefer, Steve. I'd be happy to assist with the slides if you'd like.
Yeah, why don't you pull it up?
Can you remove this one, or how do I get this off?
Okay. Can you pull it all the way to the top?
Yep, are you able to see it at the top here?
Okay, so flip it down a little. I should actually have control of this, but okay.
That's okay, just let me know when to go to the next
The
slide.
next slide, next slide, next slide, next slide, next slide. Okay, back one. Okay, so there's our vision for the Corcoran building. I don't think I ever mentioned the building first time I talked, but basically a lot of you are probably all familiar with it. It's got the ball fields. The property in the back, I suspect, is developed by now, and we would, need about 6 acres. That's about what that is. To create the site, the setbacks we need and the parking, which I think is 216 units. And you can see we shaded in a little gray space to make up for the parking that you lose. I think a lot of people using the ball fields park in the lot in front of the building. All right, next slide. Next slide. And there's the existing conditions. Basically the exterior is fine. The interior is kind of degrading to poor conditions. Next slide. And there's another sketch of what the site might look like. Next slide down. And we've got some unit layouts here. Basically, the box layouts done by Krosky Architects, but vision is to probably have an age-restricted component on the first floor, family on the next 3. If you want to keep going down, and you can see, I can't see the side boxes, but they actually lay out what they might consist of. Next slide. And there's some typical unit layouts we might have in a building like this. Next. And a lot of this is real back of the napkin, but on a quick basis, we saw the the family component being about double the size, twice as many 2s as 1, and then the age-restricted component will be almost all 1s. Next slide. This is a real back of the napkin, analysis of what the financing might look like. Since this was prepared about a year ago, a lot of things are changing and things will change next year. So, it won't exactly look like this, but as you can see that most of this is being financed through tax credits, a little bit of subsidy mortgage from DOH, which is money from the state of Connecticut, and a conventional mortgage. All right, next slide. And there's the timing I talked about earlier. Next slide down. Keep going, and okay, keep going. And this is the company profile. Flip down to a couple of the cut sheets. Keep going, keep going. More. Okay, right there, that's Capitol Lofts. That's the old Hartford Supply building. It's next to the State House. That's a historic conversion we finished about 3-4 years ago. That's part affordable, part market rate. So a little bit similar to what we're planning here. It's been a huge asset to the city of Hartford, and we hear nothing but great things about it. And next slide down. And then just before that, we purchased a office building on Allen Street next to the Union Station, and basically vacated the office tenants and converted it to single family, all single 1-bedroom apartments. Some ground floor retail there. That was, I think if you've ever been to Hartford, that used to be where the Black Bear was located. So those tenants stayed, and it basically acts as a mixed-use building. And one more slide. And this is Oxoboxel Lofts, which is in Uncasville, which is a series of industrial buildings we just purchased. It's about half done. And this project is done with the same tax credit programs that we would propose to do on a project in New Haven. And town's very excited about this, and should be done in about 6 months. That's about it for me.
Very good. Thank you, Steve. Once again, we want to remind anyone who's watching live on Facebook or who is catching this as a replay on our YouTube channel that you'll be able to go to newtownb.com for our edition this week and online to find all the links to the graphics and the decks that both of our guests have presented. So Dan Rosenthal, if you have no other comments at this point in terms of a transition, we'll just go to the questions.
Yeah, the only comment that I'll make, and again, thank you, Steve and Larry and Marla for taking the time and for putting some legwork into some slides for the public to be able to digest your thoughts around how you would approach this. I do just want to clarify again, back to the question. We based on the recommendation of the Master Plan Review Committee, their recommendation was, a mixed use component up to 2 the larger buildings on campus. So I know, if you're sitting at home following this, you're seeing 3 buildings getting discussed. Ultimately, should the public ratify the way forward at referendum in November, and then of course the Board of Selectmen and Planning and Zoning agree to move forward. When we ultimately get proposals, I do view this as probably one or the other. We're not talking about developing Shelton, Kent, and Cochrane. It would be likely the likely plan we'd follow, and then again, assuming we didn't have other developers expressed interest as well, because this would be an open process, and we'd really be looking for the best deal for the town and the one that speaks most sort of in concert with what we have there now. Obviously, we're not looking to turn the world upside down. We'd like to do something that's complementary to the campus being a park-like setting and everything else. So certainly there would be a evaluative process that would take place, but it would ultimately only be 2 buildings.
So Dan, let me just start with you, because someone did ask if it is true that once the Newtown Planning and Zoning body votes to permit residential development at Fairfield Hills, that the town at that juncture nor do townspeople have any further say in approval on vetoing or influencing any other large high-density housing proposals on the campus.
Well, again, I expect, and I can't speak for my fellow selectmen or for planning and zoning, but I expect that initially the Board of Selectmen would have to approve the recommendation of the Master Plan Review Committee. Truth be told, yes, if the public were to vote yes on November 3rd, I suspect we would, again, without speaking for Jeff Capisi and Maureen Crick-Owen, I would be willing to move forward and request that the Planning and Zoning Commission update the Fairfield Hills Adaptive Reuse Zone. Assuming they were up to update that, I would imagine, again, not speaking for planning and zoning, the limitation would be to 2 buildings. At that time, we could begin to receive proposals. Again, if those proposals were not favorable to the town, and again, we've, other than meeting with Larry and Marla, and of course Steve, and again any number of folks that will likely send something in, if it doesn't make sense, again, that would be a public process as to ratifying that proposal. When I say public, the Board of Selectmen meetings are public. That would be a public discussion.
Very good.
But then planning and zoning, if they update the reg, we're not mandated to. So just because the reg allows for housing doesn't mean a developer can force us to do anything. We own the property, so we control the use. So even if housing is permitted, we're not at the mercy of a developer. We can still control and negotiate the final use. So that's not a fait accompli. You change the zone and then you take whatever comes at you. It would be something that would be a negotiated process.
Very good. And another question for you, First Selectman Rosenthal. Will having residential use on the campus affect the ability to have events like the Arts Festival and other activities that bring large crowds, music, and other public activities to the campus?
Yeah, I mean, I think that the whole idea, at least the conversation that I've had with the folks joining us this evening, is that it's a campus that has many uses, and any housing use would have to be complementary to that. So we would still be able to have an arts festival, and I think, and I don't want to speak for the folks for Larry, Marla, or Steve, but I think that that's what's inviting about the campus, the amenities that the campus has. We have the NYA, the community center,
Right.
and any number of public events that take place on the campus throughout the year, in addition to the walking trails, which are heavily used every day. So I think that's the attraction to the campus, that all these things can take place complementary to one another and would probably be a sought after location for people to live.
Very good. And final question for you, Dan, for now. How long would the potential land leases be under the building slated for development?
So again, just to touch quickly on how, so the town owns the adaptive reuse zone for the Fairfield Hills campus is a 180-acre zone. So that includes, the high meadow, the central core of the campus, and then of course the perimeter. Most of the passive recreation takes place on the perimeter of the campus. The way that we've approached that to date, so if you take NYA, while NYA owns its building, NYA has a land lease, so they pay the town a lease payment for the land that it sits on. Mm-hmm. The town has a lease with New Salem, presumably because, again, if we retain ownership of the land, which I would expect would be our position, we retain control of the property. And I wouldn't recommend, and I don't think anyone's recommending, that we deviate from that. So there would be some sort of long-term lease for the building only. Parking on the campus, and I'll let the folks speak to that, but parking on the campus is a shared parking concept. So yes, presumably we would need more of it, but it would still be a shared concept. So I assume, and again, without negotiating anything, we would negotiate a long-term lease for the building. Right. Or some sort of, again, or they would take ownership of the building and we would own the land, which is more likely, and that way they would pay property taxes on the building. But take New Salem, for example, that's a 20-year lease with the option to extend for another 10 years. Okay. But I imagine this would be a long duration lease to make it economical.
Great, thank you very much. So for our guests, Steve, Larry, and Marla, I'm gonna start the questions kind of juxtaposing each of you down the line and then ask the other if they have anything additional or unique to add. So I'm gonna start with Steve. Steve, tell me and tell the folks that are watching what attracted you to consider this type of a development at Fairfield Hills.
Yeah, well, we're engaged in Fairfield County. I was, when we first visited the building, we were just finishing up a project, and we've got some more projects we're looking at down there. We've going to do something in Bethel. So it's an area of the state we're very, very interested in. Obviously, Newtown, Bethel, Brookfield, those are all very, very nice towns, So it's a location that we would love to work in. And, we do have an affinity for the historic building as well. So all the components are there, the incomes, the quality of the, of the town, the locations, that could make this thing successful. So it's something that would work if we were allowed to do something.
Excellent. How about you, Larry and Marla? What struck you about Fairfield Hills as being a potential?
Well, let me start and then Marla can expand. For me, it's about iconic buildings. It's about iconic buildings that can actually happen, that they can get rehabilitated. They can become what I call magnets for funding. There are a lot of iconic buildings in areas where there's no economic vibrancy. You're fortunate in your community that you have the combination of both. You've already made a foothold in Fairfield Hills in the hospital complex by all of the work that's been done over many years now, the town offices, the community center, the recreational center. And housing is a natural complement. The comment earlier, the question earlier about active public and private use on the same campus, that's precisely why we wish to be involved. We could point to numerous examples where the combination of both makes community. It makes housing more than housing, it makes it homes.
Yeah. Well, so yeah, the site has a lot of assets that are appealing. The fact that it has town buildings there and open space, recreational space makes it ideal for residential use without impacting the existing uses, as well as it enables us to retain beautiful historic buildings that adapt well to residential use. I think that the campus itself will be stimulated by residential use, so that it's not just a one-time festival or a baseball game, but there's a continual neighborhood that's established there that helps to augment the existing uses that are there. And we would be able to preserve the existing the campus environment and the architectural styles that otherwise, but for redevelopment, would be lost.
Great. I'll stick with the two of you. Can you illustrate across the landscape of all the projects that you've done, one or two that are most similar as far as this kind of institutional location and facility that have been converted to either all residential or residential commercial mixed use?
Sure. Many properties that we're involved with start as municipal-owned assets. They end up municipal-owned assets in this manner, or they end up municipal-owned assets because somebody forgets to pay the real estate tax bill and they become owned by the community. I mentioned earlier East Haven High School, the Boot Mills in Lowell, Massachusetts, which is the centerpiece of, went from being the back of the community to being the centerpiece of the community, to festivals, the Lowell Music Festival, Folk Festival. If anyone has been there, knows the vibrancy that's been created by such development. I would say architecturally, the one I pointed out earlier in Albany, New York, also municipal-owned property, big, massive public building, the school, the one with the big cupola. That one reminds me so much of this architecturally, was in a similar horrible physical condition, and made it back to life. Marla?
Yeah, I was going to also add the architectural team did a master plan for a 433 unit development on a former state hospital site in Danvers, Massachusetts. And the historic building serves as the focal point for 11 new buildings that were constructed around it. But that is strikingly similar. I was speaking with one of the partners in the firm, and he said, you know, mental institution campuses are an odd specialty, but we've done a couple of them as well.
And at least several of your projects have involved more than one single building conversion within a facility?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, most of them have. The mill complexes specifically are multiple buildings. Malden Mills is in Lawrence now, Loft 550. I showed the slide of that. That is multiple buildings. Many of the mills that we've done in places like Fall River, Massachusetts, New Bedford, Massachusetts, were campuses of buildings built over many years, many styles, and many different configurations. Each one of these is different. Each one of these is challenging. Each one of these is unbelievably complicated endeavors that take the resources of many talented people in the private sector, talented people in the public sector. If everybody rows in the same direction, the developments happen. If everybody is doing this, then they don't happen. We only work with communities, and the goal here, and presumably this will be the case, where the community is seeing it as something that would be a fabulous thing to happen. We never work in an adversarial manner with the community. But yeah, John, we'd be happy to point out or tour, for that matter, with interested parties, any and all of these developments, because one thing we're proud of, among many, is they don't look nice just day one when the photos are taken, but they look nice 5, 10, 20, 30 years later as we upkeep these assets. These are that's an important aspect of whoever you select. Great. Who's a long-term operator, who can keep these projects, these developments going, so that they're assets for the communities, not for the community, not just for the ribbon cutting, but for the long term.
Great.
Can I just interrupt for just a quick second, John? Because one thing, I know we've talked about it, and you know, I got some text from folks as well, just to remind me that this is the proposals have to be mixed use in nature, so they do have to have a commercial component. I know I believe Larry and Marla and probably Steve have given some thought to that. I know they wouldn't have a tenant in mind just yet, but how would they approach that component of it, just for for the folks that are following right now at home?
Well, I could, Steve, can I go first?
Yeah, sure.
Commercial component is essential to the 18-hour life of 18-hour days of these undertakings. As an example, the Boot Mills in Lowell, 1 million square feet, has a combination of 154 apartment units, condominium units, mixed income, and 43,000 feet of commercial. We occupy a significant portion of the commercial as regional offices. Here we see commercial, not commercial in the sense of here's going to be the brewery, here's going to be the nightclub, here's going to be the office space, because these buildings don't lay out, at least the ones we've looked at and have mentioned, don't lay out well given their relative narrowness for commercial. But we look at some of the ground level space for commercial ancillary to the apartment development, and certainly ancillary to the overall campus of Fairfield Hills.
Steve, how about on your end?
Yes.
The 3 conversions that you had done in Connecticut, I'd seen were, I believe, single facilities. Is there any experience with multiple buildings within a facility footprint?
No, not with this company. We've done 4, maybe 5 historics, and they've all been private transactions of single buildings. Other companies I've been involved with, I've done that sort of thing in St. Paul, Minnesota, and in Atlanta. But basically, given how long we've been around and what we've pursued, we haven't done anything like that. I know we've looked at quite a bit, some of the institutions that are sealing anything, but none of those projects ever seem to come off.
Okay, and to clarify, you are just looking exclusively at Cochrane House?
Yeah, I'm not even, we just looked at Cochrane, not familiar with the 2 buildings that Larry's talking about.
Okay, very good. And in terms of what your vision might be for the commercial mix in that facility?
Yeah, I mean, that's going to, we do quite often, put commercial in these buildings, and are required to put commercial in these buildings. It's something that I have to think about more, because you don't have any walk-by traffic there. It's kind of down at the edge of the campus. Not that it can't be done, but it requires some thought of what you could have. You can carve out space that no one ever leases, but maybe you can we can try to figure out something that's going to be that's actually going to be leasable and a benefit to the community.
Right. And these would be, in both of your cases, these would be rental units, not owned condos or apartments. These would be.
Rentals, yeah.
Rentals as well. The nature of the financing that one utilizes to undertake these developments actually require rental housing, and the nature of the ground lease or lease would basically preclude for sale housing. But we think rental housing for all income mixes at this location would be just a super place to have it, and would be attractive. Our overall occupancy on these developments that I've mentioned.
Kind of price range are we looking at?
Yeah, in the high 90s. The price range, depending on what the town's wishes are, if the town wants to go to a component of affordable housing, which we believe it should, and an essential, at least a portion to make the project economically viable from a public subsidy point of view, would be from the low $1,000 a month all the way to market rate housing that's been achieved elsewhere in the community. This is not, by definition, rental housing is not super luxury housing. This is not Manhattan. This is not Boston, but these are housing for people that can afford, even the workforce can afford as well, people that are making $60,000, $70,000, $80,000, $90,000 a year, which represents a lot of what the town of Newtown is.
Very good. Steve, about the same range in the Cochrane House potentially?
Yeah, I mean, there again, we'd follow chapter guidelines, and yeah, basically, the affordables would range anywhere from about 1,000 to all the way up to 1,700. So even though they're affordable, a lot of people might think they're not that affordable, but you have a high income town,
Yep.
and it's based on 30% of the average income in your
Yep.
town.
And
And then we'd have the unrestricted that could, range probably about 10% higher than that. So be pressing up around 1,900 a month.
And to clarify, in your opening statement,
Mhm.
did you say 75% affordable, 25% market?
Yeah, I mean that's the way we sketched it out on the back of a napkin type of thing.
Sure.
That's what seems to fit. That, like I said, it could change, depends on what's going to happen next year, because all the programs and the financing has been changing from year to year. We expect different things to be around next year as well.
And you said 1 and 2 bedrooms. Roughly what size are the units spec'd out in the Cochrane House footprint?
I don't have it in front of me, so the ones are probably 600 to 700, and the twos are probably 900 to 1,000.
Larry and Marla, similar?
Similar sizes. On the financing, I think I'm going to do a little bar graph. Let's go back to our high school math class. To take a building and turn it into housing, the cost to do so, but for the subsidy that comes with these tax credits, the math wouldn't work to do it. So what we're trying to solve for, both Steve and I and anybody else to be involved, is an equation that when one utilizes the federal historic credits, the state historic credits, any affordable credits, that we bring down the net effective costs to a level that can serve the rent levels that one wishes to serve. Our objective would be to serve the rent levels that the community wishes to serve within the realm of what's financeable, because what we would never wish to do, and presumably anybody that would be interested in the site never would wish to do, is propose something that wasn't financeable. People occasionally do so. We're dumbfounded when they do, but in this case, I think at least the two of us we'd welcome, we want to present something that's economic and viable.
Right. In the case of the Kent and Shelton conversions that you were looking at with Wynn Development, where do you envision all the cars that belong to the tenants are going to park without converting a lot of the park-like setting of Fairfield Hills into paved parking areas?
Well, Marla can address that. We in our material, you'll see some sketch diagrams, obviously preliminary, but we have some ideas on what that may be.
Marla?
For Kent, we had proposed the parking in the front of the building, and expanding the parking lot that's on the side by the baseball fields somewhat. And for Shelton, we had looked at parking behind the building, and also taking advantage of the site that's opposite where the building was taken down. So we had looked at those as potential sites, but again, this is very preliminary. We were looking for input from the town.
And I think the choice of family versus elderly housing, or whatever mix of that, is the desired type of housing for the town. That obviously has some impact on parking and traffic as well. We think, much like we did in East Haven as elderly housing, when sites are somewhat constrained from a parking point of view, elderly, and such a highly walkable site like this, an elderly housing intuitively works well.
Okay. Steve, how about you at Cochrane? Do you envision needing to add pavement?
Yeah, so basically, in the information we gave, we show some planned parking diagrams, very general, but I'd say about 60% of the existing parking we would use, and we'd have to expand about another 40%. Looks like the front would be the same. The back, we would expand double the size of it, and then we'd put a new parking area on one of the sides. And then when we were there, we noticed quite a few people using the parking lot to walk dogs. It was the winter, but I assume they also play ball there. So we proposed if we were to do it, we assume we'd have to make up that parking. And so we showed a new parking lot next to the ball fields.
Okay, thank you. Now we are almost at the 8 p.m. mark, and we do have just a couple more questions. Is everybody okay with extending our chat for a few minutes more?
Absolutely, we're fine.
Dan, you good?
Yep, sure.
Okay, great. So another question, numerous people posed something like this question. How have you or the management team that have operated your past conversions handled situations where there is resident versus visitor use conflicts that have developed? And how could such conflicts be mitigated based on the way you've seen visitors and events happening at Fairfield Hills? So conflicts between the folks who live there and the potentially many folks who just come in and out of the facility. Steve, let me start with you.
I don't, we don't have that kind of thing in our properties. I'm aware of. I don't see conflicts in daily activity around the building. The only conflict that could occur is if there was a conflict in the parking situation. This basically assumes it's a dedicated parking, but if you had to do shared parking, it's something that would require a lot of thought.
Very good. How about for WinnDevelopment?
I'll answer it. Parking and conflicts. That happens only 100% of the time at 100% of properties, be it a single family house on any street in Newtown or in my community where I live, where somebody's in front of my house, in front of my space, in front of my driveway. It becomes particularly exacerbated when there's very active public use at times. We've done this at Boot Mills, which is a great example where certain evenings, literally thousands of people come for music concerts. The dedicated parking that we have for our residences, we have to make sure that those evenings, those are available for the residences. But the ample parking that exists, it basically means that the parking for the residences that are built has to be exclusively for the residents and can serve as an overflow, but on call it a manned or per person basis, where it allows for some view and operational control when big events take place. The big events aren't taking place every evening, and when they do, it just takes coordination, much like it would if you were having a party at your home. In the days that we had parties at our homes, when 10 cars show up to watch the football game, managing that and being sensitive to the topic.
So you have not yet developed or managed a property that has 100% shared parking?
We have a lot of shared parking on our facilities. We have 1 million square foot or so development in Rochester, New York, that has a combination of market rate housing, middle income housing, affordable housing, commercial development, a marketplace being built that has shared parking, and it just takes coordination.
Very good. Steve, any of your developments up to now have a completely shared parking situation?
No, we don't have anything like that. I mean, we're mainly suburban developers, and to tell you the truth, towns kind of really hit on us hard. They just keep putting as much parking as we can. We have projects where they've made us do 2.5 spaces per unit, which means we have a lot of vacant parking all the time. So, in the suburbs, nothing we've really encountered a hell of a lot.
So is it, and this may sound like a dumb question, but is it a matter of if you need more, it gets added later versus making too much upfront and not using it?
Well, we've never had a situation where like I said, the way towns write codes these days, they always require much more parking than you need. It's very common to have 2 to 1. In a project like this, you won't need 2 spaces for every unit. It's probably 1.3.
Mhm.
So, none of our projects, we have an issue with the number of spaces available.
Great. Larry Marla, similar?
Yeah, similar, the use of cars, even in suburban communities, I think the parking requirements are coming down. We figure exclusive parking, 1 per bedroom. So that, depending on bedroom mix, would be similar numbers to what Steve determines.
Very good.
What Steve mentioned, sorry.
Mhm. Yeah, it would be nice to have a project where you're not getting overloaded with all these spaces. So it would be a pleasant thing to encounter. Yeah.
Oh, good to hear. Excellent. We've got one final question, it's a tough one. What would happen if you, as the developer, Steve, defaulted on any of the contracts or administrative end stuff, either during the renovation or once the housing component has occupants?
Well, no, I mean, that goes along several levels. We've never defaulted on anything, but, it's a tough question to answer, because like I said, we haven't defaulted on anything, so I'm not sure exactly how that would play out.
Well, if your track record is no default yet,
Mhm.
then we can only hope for the best.
I mean, when we get into this thing, we basically, personally guarantee to deliver the building. We have investors and banks come in and, everybody goes on the line personally, as well as all the corporate assets to finish the project. Now, occasionally you do have something that costs more, and then, we just pick it up ourselves.
Mhm.
But, and at the end of the day, you're not going to let anything default as long as you're, an ongoing business, because it basically ends your business. But, once you
Sure.
default on
And
one thing.
Dakota Partners would continue managing the property after it was developed.
Yeah. Well, we don't manage. We'll hire a local management agency. But no, we don't have any projects in the red. But if you do enough projects, I'm sure you would get one day, and we would just carry it at a loss. And there's something we know is a risk to being in this business.
Okay. WinnDevelopment, how about you guys? Do you carry on with management after the construction?
Yeah, everything we own, we manage. We're long-term managers and operators. Relative to default, I mean, the town would undertake very strict documents that relate to what would happen in default. Every developer says they never default. I've built a great business about buying developers out of deals that they've defaulted. That's happened in a number of our projects where we're the second owner or a third owner of a property. Relative to guarantees, we similarly provide the highest levels of guarantees, back it up with significant resources. These relative to construction, these are payment performance lien bonded contractors. For the layman on the call, that means if we default, bonding companies finish, so the building gets built. One aspect of towns undertaking these developments, one question could be, why does a town need a developer at all? Why doesn't it just do it itself? And towns that have tried that, cities that have tried that, hey, for years, that was the way people built housing. That was the way people built affordable housing. That was the way people built middle-income housing. And it largely didn't turn out right. The discipline imposed by the private sector, the undertakings, the guarantees, are certainly important and essential, but what's even more essential for the community, for the town of Newtown, are strict controlling documents so that in the event that it happens, because it does happen, in the event that it happens, that the town is protected and is able to spring rights that make sure that the building isn't sitting for years as an eyesore, because that would be horrible. I can't imagine that happening here with whoever the town would select, and given the professionalism of the town. But the good counsel of the town would make sure that that were not to happen.
Good. Thank you very much. Mr. Rosenthal, a minute to close if you have anything else to say or any other questions that we may have missed.
Yeah, just briefly, thank you everyone for your time and presenting. And again, thank you, John and the B for hosting. You know, and I know all this is a little bit tough over Zoom. You know, my preferred way to operate is obviously in a, you know, like we did the last ones at the high school. I much rather enjoy getting up with an audience and fielding questions, but we have to make do as we can. You know, I just want, you know, sort of approaching this whole process, and again, back to the efforts of the Fairfield Hills Master Plan Review Committee. I think everybody, you know, we're sort of at a critical juncture for the property. You know, we've owned Fairfield Hills now for 16 years. And I think many things have happened there kind of in fits and starts. You know, there was maybe very early on when we bought the property, there was a lot of interest in it. You know, the property was bought, it was purchased to have, you know, mixed use potential, not solely to become a park. But again, some of it, the economic environment, you know, we haven't exactly had tailwinds in the state economically since the housing crisis. So that's sort of left the buildings to sort of decay further and further. So sitting where I sit, we're kind of at this point where we either have to move forward on, and again, I totally understand that some people just have a visceral reaction when it comes to housing. And, you know, certainly the 1,800 folks that filled out the survey, some large percentage of them said no housing. I still think the appropriate way to deal with this is a vote. You know, and again, we've tried to make this the most transparent process we can. There's a lot of information around what we spend on the campus, what we are spending on the campus, and what we will have to spend to take the buildings down. So just as an example, if you look at the 3 buildings we discussed tonight, Cochran House is $4 million to demo. Kent House is another $4 million to demo. And Shelton is about $2 million to demo because you have to remediate them before you tear them down. So whatever we do here, there will be some level of demo. You know, Plymouth House and some of the other buildings will have to come down. But if there's a way to, again, create, you know, bring some restoration to the campus, I think add a dynamic to it, it may be worth considering. And again, some of you watching at home may say, you know what, not for me, thank you. And I really think when you think about that survey, and there were 1,800 people that filled it out, and no disrespect to them, we thought having this process where we had meetings and we shared a lot more information and try to arrive at a point where we can build some consensus. There are 18,500 voters in town that will have a chance to weigh in on this, and there'll still be, as I mentioned, a process that follows. But ultimately, you know, I think we do have to make a decision which way we go with the campus, because I do believe that these buildings have reached the point where we can't wait any longer, and we are going to have to proceed with some demolition. And before I went to the public and requested that, I just wanted to make, you know, I felt like I have a fiduciary responsibility to lay it all out there. And I think it's been difficult, I'm sure, for Steve, and Larry and Marla, because again, we're talking very, you know, it's conceptually here, because no developer, unless it's an approved use, is going to invest the heavy sum that it requires to come up with a site plan and everything else that'll be necessary for them to go through the planning and zoning process that would take place, again, should the public weigh in favorably at referendum. So,
and it will be an open process. These 2 guests of ours may end up not being involved in the project at all.
Correct. They could decide on their own, or we could frankly decide that. And when I say we, I mean Board of Selectmen, Planning and Zoning, and of course the public input that comes along with that.
Okay.
So again, they could decide, you know, this building is no, you know, they haven't applied for any credits yet. Mm-hmm. You know, they haven't gone through any financing. So all this, you know, could go in a completely different direction when it comes to who the incumbent or who the proposed player may be. I think these folks all have pedigree. Certainly they've shared a lot in terms of projects that they've already undertaken. I'm impressed with all of them. Right. But again, this would be an open process where someone else may come along that has a different vision that's more enticing to the decision makers involved in this.
Great. Well, we've kept everyone almost 15 minutes longer than we indicated, but I thought it was critically important that we got all the questions in that were posed by folks from the community, as well as ones we formulated here. I want to thank everybody. Steve Kaminsky with Dakota Partners, Larry and Marla Curtis. Larry, President and Managing Partner with WinnDevelopment. Marla, who is on her own an architect and consultant, and is also involved with a firm as well. Marla, the firm is
The architectural team.
The architectural team. Thank you, and I apologize. Thank you all for the information tonight, and we will once again remind anybody who's watching that they can go to newtownb.com to access the deck information from both of the presentations and look very closely at the details on those floor plans, as well as the comparable properties that both these firms have been engaged in Connecticut and throughout the Northeast and the country. Thank you all for being part of this, and good luck.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.